right. We've got some folks joining in here. So, Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you to get today's session started.
There we go. Thanks a lot, Jacob, and everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Really looking forward to sharing some thoughts related to how to best optimize your Salesforce investment for Agentforce. My name is Greg Wasowski. I'm a Senior Vice President of Consulting and Strategy at Aquiva Labs. There are two things we do. We are a Summit SI partner, helping organizations unlock value from the Salesforce investment, but we're also an expert PDO helping App Exchange partners build and scale solutions. And I'm delighted to be joined today by my ex-colleague from Salesforce, actually. So not only an amazing expert in this field, but an ex-colleague that I'm really happy to be reconnecting with. Cam, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. And so good morning, good afternoon, where everyone is in the world. So as Greg mentioned, my name's Sangha. I am a customer success director at Salesforce. Been with the company for about 11 years, and I have the fortunate job of working with lots of good customers around their usage and extracting business value out of the Salesforce platform. So really excited for today's session.
Brilliant. And Cam, as I recall, when we worked together, you were covering financial services, but right now you work predominantly with customers in the high-tech and telco space. Is that correct?
Yep. So fortunate enough to have worked with loads of great asset management, insurance, and financial services customers. Now applying my trade in the world of high technology and telco.
Amazing. Brilliant. Well, let's get started then. First of all, I am joined by Cam, and if you have ever joined any Salesforce-led sessions, we have added these slides just in case we cover any forward-looking statements. I think, Cam, pretty much everything that we'll be discussing today is currently available, but in case we do, please make sure that you make any purchasing or partnership relationships based on currently available technologies, and you can find full text of these on Salesforce's website. So here are the things we're going to cover today. We're going to start with really understanding pricing optimization, and then cover some of the topics that come up quite often in our conversation with customers when it comes to AI Center of Excellence, when it comes to AI governance frameworks, when it comes to change management in the world of AI. And finally, what are some of the suggestions Campbell will have? So let's get started. And first of all, I think all of you are familiar with Agentforce. Agentforce is, of course, revolutionizing the way that Salesforce's customers are working with Salesforce, unlocking value through data and AI. There are a lot of out-of-the-box tools available. We've actually completed 15 Agentforce projects to date at Aquiva with customers across a number of industries. But one of the questions we get in quite often is how does it actually work? And from pricing perspective, what is that pricing? Because it's so much different, isn't it, when it comes to the traditional approach where typically customers, I think, are used to buying per user per month. There are some instances where we have per org pricing. But in this case, Cam, this is very different, isn't it? So we're actually talking about consumption-based pricing, concepts such as credits, where you have cost alignment, you have full visibility, but that's actually based on consumption, isn't it?
Yeah, so we introduced flex credits probably 4 or 5 months ago as a differentiator in the market. So rather than selling big bundles of usage for Agentforce, flex credits is what we've worked out works really well with customers. So customers don't have to worry about working out what a flex credit is and having to decide how many they need. We sit down with customers and go through a whole assessment around how many actions do you think your agents will be taking, and based on that, we'll build out a flex credit consumption plan. So it works really well. I work with a lot of customers who use it in this way. And again, for customers to be reassured, you have your digital wallet where you can constantly track how you're consuming these flex credits. So everything is very transparent.
Amazing. And for internal users, so when we're thinking about internally facing agents, there is also an option related to additions, either as an add-on or fully fledged Agentforce SKUs. Salesforce is also introducing quite a lot of flexibility related to agreements where you can actually convert some of the spend between the users and agents. So that's an interesting concept that you can explore with your AE. And finally, from the model perspective, you mentioned the digital wallet, Cam. I think right now there are two options available when it comes to pay-as-you-go and pre-purchase, but pre-commit is another option that will be coming up soon. So you can optimize really the overall spend and usage. I actually have a full article on pricing. So if anyone is interested, please reach out after this webinar. I will be happy to share that with you. What are you seeing from customers? Do they understand the pricing? Are there any things that tend to be difficult for them to comprehend or adapt to?
Yeah, well, there's two things that we generally see. So internally facing agents, that's the way we do it, is per user per month license base. So I think a lot of customers weren't aware of that. But when we go out externally to your end consumers, it is mixed at the moment in terms of prepay or pay as you go. So I strongly work with enterprise customers at the moment, and we do a lot of prepay calculations around flex credit so that we have built in enough consumption. And then that also works more favorably for them in terms of pricing and how that works. So pay as you go, you're kind of consuming. And I think it's going to be quite difficult to cap as a customer how much you want to spend. So the prepay is what I've seen work really well, but at the moment still mixed out there in the market.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I'm finding quite interesting, again, coming back to the concept of flex credits, is how it actually relates to actions. And here is where the mechanics of how Agentforce actually works comes in play. So if we're thinking about specific functions of the agents that are being executed, this is really where the credits are being consumed. So we have 20 credits that are being consumed by each of the actions being triggered. So in this case, you have a changing of a customer address or summarizing a case. And for those of you that remember the first iteration of the consumption pricing from Salesforce, that was based on conversations, wasn't it, Cam? So this is quite an improvement where we're actually looking at smaller chunks of that and really thinking about the specific action. So if we were to give an example from case management perspective, customer comes in and asks about the status of the order, right? What you're seeing on the left-hand side here. So we have 3 actions being triggered. So first of all, we're identifying who the customer is, we're getting all the cases, and then we are adding the case comment. So in this case, 3 actions have been triggered, right? On the right-hand side, you can see a similar experience that some of you may be familiar with when it comes to Gemini or ChatGPT. We're asking one question and you get the answer. That's one action typically being consumed because we actually have we answering question with knowledge. So these are some of the examples. And I think Cam, you mentioned calculations and trying to understand how to calculate how much of the spend you would have. So these are some of the things that I believe you and your colleagues do at Salesforce, right?
Yeah, we have a team dedicated to working with customers around looking at the flex credit consumption, and so putting together in a calculator and obviously putting a pricing behind that. I think one of the biggest things I've learned over the last 6 to 9 months working with customers is be very specific around your actions. What you want to do is avoid a decision tree experience because you'll consume a lot more actions. Agents are very smart. So there's a lot an agent can do in one action. So that's probably one of the biggest learnings I've taken away in the last 6 to 9 months.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. One of the things that we won't actually be discussing today is data cloud. If your Agentforce actually leverages data clouds, like the example we have on the right-hand side, where we're doing semantic search that may span across a number of platforms, and we actually leverage a data cloud for that, there'll be a separate thing that we need to take into account, Cam, right? When it comes to the credit consumption, these are not the flex credits for Agentforce. That's a separate exercise that you would actually have to go through. Slightly more complex, but again, this is something that your team does very well from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, so what we've seen is for a lot of customers, Data Cloud is almost the foundation for creating agents and rolling them out. Obviously, there is data in Salesforce, you can get agents to work off that. But what we've seen is you need to enrich that experience, and that's where Data Cloud comes in. But from a reporting point of view and from a agentic point of view, the Data Cloud is quite specific, and some of the operations behind it requires the working. But what we have there is data credits as opposed to flex credits. So again, we'll work with customers around how are you going to be using data cloud? Is it all around ingesting data and transforming it, or actually is it more from a more basic point of view, a
Yeah,
basic point of view? So we manage all of that in conversations.
yeah. And we have internally built some simpler calculators that we tend to use in the first conversations we are having with customers. But the collaboration with Salesforce, of course, works very well. As you mentioned, Salesforce actually has the whole team that is responsible for doing that, especially if you're an enterprise customer. Brilliant. And another question I tend to get quite often come is, how do I actually get started? Do I really have to pay for everything from day one? And one thing that some people may not be aware of is Salesforce Foundations, which I think is just fantastic. We leverage Salesforce Foundations internally at Aquiva. Our business, of course, runs fully on Salesforce, and a lot of our customers take full advantage of it as well. Amazing set of capabilities that is available to anyone with Enterprise Edition or higher for free. So if you don't have it activated, please do. But what it means from the Agentforce and Data Cloud perspective is that you actually get quite a number of Agentforce credits and Data Cloud credits for free as part of Foundations. And a lot of the POCs that we've been working on are actually just consuming what you have available for free in Foundation. So there are, of course, limits here, but again, to run a POC, that's absolutely brilliant. And I know that both we as Salesforce partners and Salesforce customers really welcome that. Cam, have you seen any good use cases of Salesforce Foundations that you can potentially share with us?
Yeah, I guess I've worked with some small, medium customers around rolling out Salesforce Foundations, and it's always started from a pilot or a POC point of view. Some of the great use cases we see is around service agents. So lots of customers have knowledge bases internally, like several knowledge bases, right? The great way is around actually how can you improve that customer experience, whether it's through web, chat, or channels like WhatsApp, right? And using the agents to go and trawl through the knowledge and provide specific answers to their questions is what we've seen a lot. So it's a really good use case that I've seen working with a couple of customers.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So one of the follow-up actions for you is, if you're not using Salesforce Foundations, make sure that that's activated, make sure that your team is aware of that. And if you don't know how to take full benefit of the functionalities that are being unlocked for you for free, reach out to us, we'll help you. Brilliant. Let's move to the second topic, Cam, which is standing up an AI agent center of excellence. And that's where I'll lean a little bit on you, perhaps, because when we're thinking at a high level to start with, it's really what an agent is. We have these 5 categories, right? We're thinking about the role, about data, actions, guardrails, and channels. So really thinking about what's the key job to be done, what knowledge does the agent actually have to have access to, specific capabilities, guardrails, and then where do they actually work? So that's the starting point. But when we're really thinking about the key pillars of COE, what are you seeing, Cam? You work with a lot of enterprise customers, specifically in the UK. What are some of these pillars when it comes to creating a COE?
Yeah, so I guess when we first launched Agentforce last year, the take up was great, but actually when it started, lots of admins, developers, again, were playing with the technology without understanding the true needs behind what needs to be agentic, what can you drive. What we've seen over the last 6 months is around organization maturing now, around having agentic centers of excellence. So they're beginning to form more and more. And that's specifically around what is the company's strategy around AI. There's lots of AI solutions at the moment, but does the company actually have a strategy, and where does that fit in? So that's a key area. Obviously, technology plays a big part of it. And we're working very closely around what is best practice, what is your data strategy. I think a lot of customers get hung up around needing everything, but actually
Yeah.
you can start very small with data and grow over time. So technology is a key area. Governance is, I think we'll probably talk about a bit more later on, and Greg, but governance, especially in an enterprise world, is very strict. So we're having to work closely with risk teams and security teams to make sure that anything that's going to be launched will work within the remit of that organization, their brand, their messaging, etc., etc. Lots of work that we're doing around ideation. So we talked about in the previous slide, roles, actions, guardrails. So working with R&D teams, coming up with innovative ideas around how agents can be used is really important. And then I think you look at the first six pillars, that's all around the beginnings part of your agentic journey. But actually, once you have an agent and once you've rolled it out, there's a lot of great work that is done by customers around monitoring and optimizing that agent. So you can create an agent very quickly, you can get it out there, but actually testing it and understanding, is that agent behaving in the right way? Is it producing the right results? Is probably one of the key areas that we're working more and more with customers. And I think you would have heard with the Dreamforce announcements with the agent test center that's come out. So it's providing a lot of valuable information. It's a great tool for customers to use to get a better understanding of what their agents are like. And I guess enablement training, that's a big one. We're here with Aquiva Labs today. One of the things we do recommend when you go down your agentic experience is making sure that you've got the right skills and experience. I have seen in the past where if you haven't been trained and enabled and try and tackle this yourself, you can go into pitfalls. Obviously, with Aquiva Labs and our partners, they are well trained. And I would say in 90% of the cases I've worked on, we've worked with an SI on delivering that first agent.
Amazing. Thanks a lot. And if this all looks scary, I think it looks scary for a lot of organizations because we are simply in a new agentic world. We, the same way as we've been helping organizations set up the center of excellence around Salesforce and best practices, the things you're seeing here come up, the same pillars, I would say, when it comes to setting up any center of excellence. So really focusing on strategy and operations, best practices, governance, innovation, monitoring, enablement, and training. And those are some of the things that we very, very often actually help customers with as well. What are some of the key roles that you're seeing that are crucial for setting up a center of excellence?
Yeah, so a very important topic to discuss, and I can see this maturing a lot over the next 6 to 12 months in the industry. What we're talking with customers is around, okay, you have an agent, you've built an agent. Who actually is going to own and manage that agent? Is it going to be IT? Is it going to be the business? Is it going to be somebody else in the organization? Need an owner who's responsible for it. COE leadership is probably going to be the fastest growing area, I think, amongst customers. At the moment, people are tackling agents and seeing what can be done. But with a formal COE leadership, there actually be a pathway and a strategy going forward. So that's one of the key things that we're focusing on with our customers. We'll talk about responsible AI, and this is kind of the area around compliance and making sure if you're a customer that's has a lot of regulatory compliance that you fit within those boundaries. Are you building out ethical agents? What are you doing around privacy and fairness? So at the moment, I'm in the middle of an engagement where we're having that exact conversation, and that role has kind of been defined with the customer. So it's a brilliant thing to see. I'm not saying every customer has it, but it is an area that we're seeing growing with the AI architects. I think every organization has their enterprise architects, technical architects. It's probably at the moment what we're seeing as a hybrid role. Are we seeing dedicated AI architects? I haven't. Other colleagues in Salesforce have. But again, I think this is going to be a role that's going to mature over the coming 6 to 12 months with specific dedicated skills. And then with AI business analysts, they're becoming more and more. So at the moment, I'm working with a telco, and we're building out a quoting agent and working closely with the business analysts around how can we optimize the agent to build quotes quicker and faster and get them out to customers. And then obviously with the AI testing, at the moment, typically what we're seeing is those roles are becoming more and more mature. At the moment, in most Salesforce teams or Salesforce practices that customers have, the testing team generally takes it on. So we enable and train them. Obviously, working with yourselves, such as Aquiva Labs, you may take on the testing or you'll train up the testing team on the customer side. So these are probably 6 key roles that you would consider. Some of them could be hybrid, some of them could be combined together. But to truly understand the power of what AI can deliver, and obviously what Salesforce delivers with its agents, this is probably going to be the key area for what needs to be done in the industry.
Amazing. Thanks a lot. I would say our experience is quite similar to what you're describing. Interestingly enough, we actually do have AI architects, so to be specific, Agentforce architects at Aquiva, but this is perhaps, as an SI partner, we are perhaps slightly more advanced in these topics, but that's one of the first roles that we actually deploy to the engagements together with a team of, as you mentioned, consultants or slash business analysts, testers, and of course developers, because right now with Agentforce, we're not simply talking about the ability to interact it with a chat function or voice. Right now, we're also talking about invocable actions where, a flow or Apex can actually trigger Agentforce. We are looking broader at whether the experience is today with Agentforce API. So certainly quite a lot of work for our devs. What you're seeing at the very top, that's typically what we're seeing the customer owning. Interestingly enough, we haven't yet seen a dedicated ethics person working with us. We have actually had a number of conversations with legal teams as we work with a number of customers in highly regulated industries like financial services or healthcare. The trust element and the guardrails are really important. One final thing I would perhaps add, Cam, when it comes to AI testing is it's not your testing in the traditional sense of it. We are, of course, talking about AI that is non-deterministic right now with some of the advancements we are seeing with the new agent builder and scripting. There's, of course, more that will be available when it comes to more of the predictability, but in the end, it is not the same type of testing you would do with the code you built in Apex. So that's an interesting aspect as well. So finally, on this topic, what are some of the markers of successful COE program?
Yeah, great question. So I think if we go back into the start of the conversation, right, what we think about with agents is how does the ideation piece start? And so to go down the ideation path, what we really, really look for from our side is there executive buy-in around the agents and what the business want to do? Ultimately, there'll be a cost to go into production and roll out your agents. So one of the things that you don't want to do is maybe build something out, launch it, but not actually have tangible metrics to
Right.
say what is the business value that's being delivered. So if you don't have strong executive buy-in, we see that potentially as an issue for launching your agents into production. And that kind of goes hand in hand with a well-defined use case and strategy. So I would say I do a lot of work upfront around building out a business value case for if we're going to build an agent to, a good example is I've worked with a customer around field service engineers going out on site, whether it's a customer's house or a building. Actually, what are we trying to do with that field service engineer? What we talk about is empowering them with knowledge so that when they're on site, can we improve their efficiency? So instead of being on site for 5 hours, they'll be on site for 3 hours. So we're creating a great use case and save 2 hours, can do more jobs, but actually that's such a great use case because you can actually monetize and get those engineers to do more in that week. So again, talk about the strategy, talk about the business value, that starts creating a successful COE. And then as we go kind of down the left-hand side of this slide, right, we talk about making sure that when you are building agents, right, you have grounded, clean data. You make sure that when you're working with teams or your partners, you you're looking at having the right skills and making sure that you're doing the right technical and prompt work. The sixth bullet here, well, sorry, the fifth bullet, which talks about realistic expectations of product capabilities. I think what a lot of customers are going to find from the Dreamforce announcements is we've now produced a lot of agents out of the box covering a number of areas. So if you think about our products, we have sales templates in the sales area. We also provide in service, marketing, commerce, financial services. There's a lot of stuff that will get customers started from the ground and not have to worry about creating something from scratch. And then obviously, last but not least, I think I talked about at the start, right? We've got ownership, but how do we do the value realization? What is the value realization? I mentioned just one around engineers saving time on site. Another one I mentioned is around quotes or building orders for customers rather than a person sitting at their desk doing 50, 60 clicks to build out a quote. Can an agent do it? And we have agents that are able to create orders out of the box and really reduce that time of a salesperson having to create orders. So lots of good use cases out there and lots of ways to work at value realization.
Amazing. Thanks a lot. I'll come back to the point related to use case definition. I think that's a really important one. I had a question related to that just yesterday, actually during a workshop related to use cases with an insurance partner. So we'll come back to this topic. We've got one question. Actually, we'll do the questions later on, but I think this is relevant. The question is: are there any agent templates for loyalty management clouds? We actually do have a customer in the hospitality space that is using loyalty management. As far as I remember, Cam, I'm not sure that you've got it on top of your head, but I believe that there are actually a set of agents for loyalty as well. Something I would need to double check. I am not 100% sure, but I'm quite
Yeah,
certain.
I will
Go ahead.
apologize. I should have shared a slide in our presentation today where we've got the various clouds, and obviously with loyalty management, we have an out-of-the-box template for loyalty promotions. So there are agents available. I think there's another one as well, but maybe we can share this after the session, Greg, and I'll provide the
Absolutely.
template
Yeah.
as well. I think
Please
we're
reach
currently
out.
hybrid.
Amazing. Please reach out to us after the session, and we'll definitely share it with you. Brilliant. So let's move to AI governance frameworks. Again, from the governance perspective, Cam, especially in your role as a customer success director, what are some of the key things that need to be taken into account?
So obviously working with enterprise customers, the risk and compliances at the moment is a big topic. So when we embark on a pilot or a proof of concept for an agent, actually the first bit of homework we've got to do is around ensuring that if whatever work we're undertaking, that it's going to be approved by security within the customer. So is the agent allowed to perform specific actions and tasks? Is it able to look up specific data?
Yeah.
What data is allowed to be permissible and change, etc. So that's probably a big area at the moment that we're working on. When you build out agents, it's quite fun. We've seen customers build out stuff. We're on show and tells and we're like, okay, that looks really cool. Isn't that brilliant? But actually, the flip side of it is the testing, right? You can build an agent very quickly, launch it, but how much testing are you doing? So from a
Yeah.
governance point of view, when you think about the guardrails and what an agent can and cannot do, testing is key. And one of the conversations I have with one of my colleagues is we say the build part is actually this much, but when it comes to testing, it's the testing is bigger than the actual build because you've got to think about all the various scenarios, all the different things somebody may ask the agent, and how's it going to handle it. So I would say the testing is massively in a governance point of view.
Yeah.
The other side, I think we've talked about a few times now, is around the right metrics, right? Who is going to be important, who is going to be accountable for the success of that agent? So if you're thinking about building out agents, always think about what's the business value that you're trying to drive. Is it monetary? Is it efficiency? Is it one of the other areas, right? There's got to be something tangible that as a AI practice that you're looking for. So that's what is probably one of the key areas in governance for us. And then
Yeah.
last but not least, right, the whole thing around optimizing your agent force investment is right. How do you do more? How do you scale your AI practice? How do you scale your agents? Do more with less. So can you automate manual work, reduce costs, handle higher volumes? That's probably all encompassed amongst the governance at the moment from what we're seeing. And the idea is to make things simple, not complicate it. And I think when I talked earlier around actions and areas like that, I have seen customers that when they build out actions, it's like a decision tree. So from a governance point of view, I think working closely with someone like Aquiva Labs, working closely with Salesforce, will make sure that from a agentic point of view, we're able to kind of rate what agent you've built and say, okay, here's the good bits, here's the bad bits, here how you can refine things. So it's massively important from a governance point of view.
Absolutely. And coming back to the point you made related to the value, I'm not sure what you're seeing talking to customers, but number one business priority that is being addressed with Agentforce right now is efficiency. We have organizations coming to us saying they're trying to move from grow to scale, talking to us about the fact that they can't just chuck more people at a given problem, and they are trying to find solutions that would help them work differently, as you said, to do more with less, even though, I think this is being slightly overused in the common rhetoric. But efficiency gains is something that customers are really looking for, and with Agentforce, that's really possible.
Yeah, so I think in the industry I'm covering at the moment with telco and high-tech customers, efficiency is probably the key one. I'm not fortunate enough to work in the retail industry at the moment, but I can imagine with my retail colleagues, actually, it'd probably be more around monetizing using agents with promotions and offers
Right.
and how can you bring those customers in. But the areas I'm working in is massively around efficiency. And I've talked about two use cases already. One's around field service engineers going out on site, reducing the amount of time they're spending. So they may save 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours a week. That can be another job they can take on. Obviously, there's a monetary value behind that if you're doing it, but actually, it was the efficiency point we were looking at. When I talked about, again, quoting agent, the quoting agent was less about sending out 100 quotes and having a monetary value. It was more around actually when I go to create a quote, it is 15, 20 clicks because I'm building out a very complex quote. It's not that has been built badly. This is quite a complex quote I'm building and it takes 15 minutes. But actually with an agent, we've seen we can reduce that 15 minutes down to 2 or 3 minutes. So the efficiency saving there is massive. And that will free up a salesperson to do other things, focus on the selling side rather than having to manually create a quote. So
Absolutely.
definitely what you've said around efficiency is what I'm seeing. Hopefully, I'll get to work in a different industry soon and see the monetary side of it.
Amazing. And the monetary side is something we're actually seeing with quite a number of customers, especially in the high tech and hospitality space. Brilliant. So I think we covered some of these when it comes to the responsible AI governance maturity level. We're really going from informal to reactive to formal, looking at, first of all, things that may not be necessarily value-led from the onset and be somewhat uncoordinated, to having those pockets of processes that we identify, to formal, which is the proactive, integrated, principled way that applies to all the things that we already mentioned. And I think we're really trying hard to help customers move to the formal element as quickly as possible. I think with quick ideation and prototyping, we've very often seen customers just seeing what's technically feasible, which is great. I think the feasibility test is, of course, important. We talked about desirability and viability, which are two other tests that need to be met. But finally, when we're really thinking about scalability, all these things really mentioned here in the formal bucket are so important, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you look at this slide from informal to formal, you could think about, so with an informal agent, it's probably not going to be driving a lot of value. It's probably going to just be taking off some low-hanging fruit. What we've seen is if you kind of just build something, test it, think it might be a good idea, it fits in that informal space, the chance of it going into production and being a success is probably less. Where actually when you do it in a formal way, where you define everything correctly, have the right governance, have the right skills, the right testing, they are more successful and obviously has a high probability into a production environment from what I've seen over the last 6 to 9 months.
Absolutely. Perfect. Let's move to change management. I think that's a really interesting topic. Change management is hard. I'm not sure whether you agree with that, but especially now when we're thinking about AI and working with totally new set of tools or really reinventing how we work, that change management is perhaps where a lot of organizations struggle when it comes to moving from early prototyping and POCs to solutions that scale, that adapt, that advance, and bring business value. What do you think?
Yeah, so change management is probably one of the areas in the customer success world we work quite closely with our customers. And I think everyone knows change can be a difficult thing. A lot of time people are used to doing things in their existing ways. If you think about Salesforce generally as a technology and adopting it and using it out, change can be daunting sometimes to users, daunting to individuals. Now with humans and agents, change management is actually even more important than ever, right? When we talk about agents coming into the workplace or coming into customers using it more, it's not necessarily about let's reduce headcount or let's reduce these jobs. It could be agents and humans working hand in hand. And how does that work? And so managing that is one of the areas that is now picking up quite a lot. So within Salesforce, we're ProSci change management practitioners. And one of the things we're now focusing a lot on is how do we provide that continuous learning for customers and
Mhm.
make sure that adoption is managed well. So it's new for me. We're all new to agents and agentic AI, so it's a learning curve at the moment. I would say I've been lucky enough in the clients I've been working with that they have change management practices. So we share information, we define processes that we can take in. So not necessarily technical, right? It's going to be a lot of soft side for, especially where the humans are involved. So again, working with someone like yourselves, Greg, you've probably done this with your customers, making sure that you delivering that change management piece. And so I think as customers, you shouldn't be worried, but you should be asking, how can we do change better?
Absolutely. Again, if you're interested in this topic, we have developed a change management framework specifically for AI. So happy to share that, happy to discuss it further. But that's definitely a very, very important topic. When I'm thinking about how customers get started and what really, really works, I think there are these three elements come when it comes to, first of all, as you mentioned, focusing on specific users, really understanding the jobs to be done, pains and gains, and building a use case that centers around that. So really starting small, but with something that brings value, and then broadening the reach and then fully integrating that. Would you agree with this approach?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that at the start. So we talk about it within Salesforce is start small and go fast, right? So focus on the quality of building something rather than the quantity. So prioritize a use case, think about a clear problem and what you can solve. And with that, right? So the test, tune, and repeat process I've mentioned about testing. So you can go small and fast, but then beyond the go live, right? You're continually refining and making that agent stronger and greater. And that can be involved have bringing in more data. So making sure you're starting small, but actually you can make it bigger with having more and more data. And so these 3 points are super top of mind for myself. And again, a recent experience that I've had, we've built an agent where we started very small, and it was basically you could say it was like a dumb agent, right? So it wasn't integrated. It had the data, but it wasn't integrated with upstream and downstream systems. But actually, we proved a concept by going quick and fast. So now the next phase is it's being integrated with upstream and downstream systems and APIs if needed, so that we can say, actually, we've done this piece, now here's a bigger piece. And once we prove that, we'll have a path to production.
Right. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about adoption and consumption. I think from the consumption perspective, we have very briefly actually touched on that at the onset of our webinar. But from the adoption perspective, tell us a little bit more about the how customers are augmenting the workforce, how the positioning works, how the onboarding of agents actually works.
Great question there, Greg. So with the whole adoption and consumption around agents, so I think I talked about it earlier, right? there's agents and humans working together. So how do you augment the workforce? So there's great examples out there that I've seen from our success stories, and I think they're posted on salesforce.com as well, where workforce is potentially retrained around how they're going to be working closely with an agent. So I mentioned we have templates. Customers are rolling out these templates. And if you think about and a great example would be sales, right, where you have BDR templates to do all the research in the background for a sales rep. So that actually before they go and speak to a customer and start a sales conversation, they've got the information at their hand to understand who the account is, who the key stakeholders. So there's a big piece there around when you come to look at the augmentation is what is my role now? What is the agent doing for me? And bringing that together. So something that we've seen working really, really well. And it's probably worth saying we've actually built probably close to 50 agents internally now at Salesforce, and we have our own sales BDR templates. We have our own quoting agents, and we're beginning to carry on building that out. We have sales coaches, for example. So if I'm a
Right.
salesperson and I'm being onboarded into Salesforce, actually before I'm rubber stamped to go out to the market, we use sales coach to train and work out, am I conversational enough? It will score me and say, right, Cam, you're good to go out selling, or it can pick up in a lot of context that I haven't delivered to make sure that I refine my pitch before I go out into the market and start selling. And then again, we can talk about this, Greg, offline as well. We've got some great examples of the templates and what we're doing, not just internally at Salesforce, but with our customers as well.
Amazing. So these are some of the really good examples of where we've seen autonomous AI being deployed. From the experience we've had, Cam, most of the use cases are still focused on augmented AI, so use cases where you do knowledge search and retrieval using that in specific contexts, summarization of any objects, creating content. So those are some of the early use cases that bring a lot of value already. And of course, yes, now we are starting to see examples of fully autonomous SDR agent or sales coach being deployed as well in the service space as well. There's actually a lot of conversations related to contact center automation and how service agents actually help with the overall user experience, but also the efficiency that we already talked about. So finally, the suggested next steps, just to summarize perhaps some of the things we've been talking about. The first point was about defining clear objectives, wasn't it? And I couldn't agree more with that. So I already mentioned the framework related to jobs to be done, but really, first of all, pausing for a second, understanding what is it that you're trying to achieve internally as an organization? What are some of the key strategic priorities? But then understanding your customers and understanding not only the end customer experience, but perhaps also your customer's experience. Similarly to you, we work with a lot of customers in the B2B space. That's typically a B2B2B or a B2B2C, right? So having an understanding of the impact on the end customer is crucial, as well as the internal experience, and having those clearly defined objectives. And what do you think about the data element? We haven't actually talked too much, but we find it paramount for a successful AI project.
Yeah, data is obviously key. We know obviously Salesforce customers that have Salesforce data in Salesforce, but it depending on what you want to do with your agent, we find in a lot of use cases there is data that's going to have to come from outside, and we look at what enrichment is required for that data element and how is it going to make the agent successful. So what customers should not do is get hung up on all the data in the world and thinking actually we've got a data lake here, we've got a data lake here. How do we piece all of that information together and bring it to Salesforce? If you think about Data 360 with Salesforce, a lot of that can be done in Data 360. So goes back to what I said, start small and go fast. So bring in what data you need. Let's not think about 2 or 3 years ahead that you need the complete 100% of data. That will come over time. But what you need initially to get started is what should be focused on. I think I've seen in cases where agentic AI can become a data project. Actually, that's what you want to try and avoid, that this is becoming a data project and you get stuck out there. So we've got great experience. I think we've got a lot of good use cases as well at Aquiva Labs. So the more customers speak with us around how can you get started quickly, what data you need, how can the data be ingested into Salesforce, or is Salesforce, is the data already there? We can have those conversations and make sure that you're up and running quickly.
Yeah, I fully agree here. Some of the early use cases don't necessarily require you to go outside of your Salesforce instance, but and you mentioned things like, oh, I already have a data lake, it's great. There is a concept of a zero copy with data 360, so it's actually in some instances not as complex and time consuming as you think it might be when it comes to consolidating that. Of course, there's great and experience and efficiency gains if you are able to build that true customer 360 view. So really looking at the concept of a CDP where data 360 started from long-term years, absolutely paramount. But when it comes to those first POCs, at times there's just an overkill. And I think we already mentioned things related to optimization, monitoring, human oversight, and data privacy and security. But is there anything else you would like to add here?
They're probably the most critical ones, as I mentioned, right? Building an agent can be very quick. When you get to the end of that whole process, it's the whole monitoring and testing element that we believe is, well, not we believe, it is the most critical part, because what you want to ensure is that your agent is not falling over anywhere, is not going down a rabbit hole and giving the wrong information. So very important, and that is human oversight, right? It needs somebody like me or you, Greg, looking at what's been coming out of the agent. Is it right? What do we need to refine, and doing that piece. And again, with Data 360, there's lots of great reporting and monitoring out of the box that is there for customers to utilize from the get-go.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And finally, just to close the session and perhaps open each to any questions you may have, how do you get started? To your point, start small and go fast. I think when it comes to selecting the first MVP, as long as it brings the value to your organization, that very often actually starts with a single use case. So, for example, a service agent with a preset of actions, single channel, access to a single knowledge base with perhaps at times limited scope of users that are being addressed. But that's really enough at times for the first POC, just disproving some of the hypotheses we have, and we scale from there. Then it goes into, oh, here's your custom agent, and here's a more complex one that's actually spans across multiple systems. So something that we have been discussing right now, Cam. Would you agree with this approach?
Yes, definitely. I think this is a great slide and a great way to think about what your journey is going to be for those of you listening, and how you'll be supported on that path with Aquiva Labs. I think this is something that we also say internally at Salesforce when we're working with our customers. So this is something I definitely agree with.
Amazing. Well, thanks everyone. I think we have 5 minutes for a couple of questions in case anyone would like to ask us any question.
Amazing. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Cam. We do have a couple questions that I think we can start to run through. And two, please reach out if we don't have the chance to answer your question live. So the first question I've got for you two is, how are organizations typically identifying their first high value use cases for Agentforce? And then the second part of the question is, what criteria should we be looking at when choosing where to start?
Yes, great one. Cam, would you like to go first?
Yeah, great question. I think you asked me this during a part of our presentation.
Yeah.
We talked about efficiency. So in the industry I'm covering at the moment, there's a lot around how can we save time? How can we do things quicker? And that's the efficiency piece. So there's no magic bullet here. One of the things I would say is something that is going to improve over time is the ideation process. So it's a really, really good question, because one of them thing is, okay, where do I start? Should it be a knowledge agent? Should it be a sales BDR agent can, if I talk about the two use cases we've done field services agent and a quoting agent. Would you have thought of that? Probably not. And that comes through a dialogue with experts such as ourselves, experts as Aquiva. So we'll sit down and we'll think about, actually, there's a conversation that we've had with a customer that, oh, this process, etc., doesn't look right, doesn't work for us. And actually, the answer could be, let's do an agent. The answer could actually be, well, let's build out something using flows and things in Salesforce, right? The agent might not always be the right answer, but unless you're having the conversations around what your business challenges are, then it's probably going to be quite difficult to understand, is an agent the right thing or not the right thing? So we constantly talk about, what's the business challenge? What is your strategy objectives? And from that, the ideation comes around. So Greg, from the Salesforce world and how we operate, right? So we deliver SICs, we have AI days in our Bluefin Tower. So there, it's all around coming up with ideas and helping customers to think about what they can do. So definitely reach out to your sales guys, reach out to Aquiva Labs around how can they help you come up with ideas for agents.
Amazing. And we've got a framework for that. So again, if you're interested in finding the right use cases, I actually find that that's probably what's slowing some organizations, just selecting the right use case. And for us, it really starts with understanding the overall business priorities, then selecting a given function within the business and something that may be a little bit counterintuitive, but we actually go wide. So try to find a lot of use cases and then narrow down. So we actually select a couple that bring a lot of value, that are testable, that align with specific objectives, whether this is business growth or efficiency or something else. So definitely reach out to us. We'll be happy to share that framework and run you through an exercise like that. Jacob, I think that's all the time we have had. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Cam, thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant, Greg. Thank you very much. Love the session. Thank you.